It's Tim Sheeser for TechSpot, and this is the all-new HTC One M8, the device that is the successor to last year's HTC One and is unusually named, but does come with a 5-inch 1080p LCD display, the new Snapdragon 801 SoC inside by Qualcomm, 16GB of internal storage plus a micro SD card slot and 2GB of RAM. Plus on the back you'll notice the all-new Duo camera module, which is the same ultra-pixel sensor as we saw in the HTC One, but now paired with a depth sensor, which will give some cool effects. There's also a 2600 mAh battery inside, and it's running Android 4.4 out of the box with HTC's Sense UI 6.0. With the launch of the original HTC One in 2013, the company was positioning themselves as the maker of high-end flagship Android devices that really ooze quality, and this has come through again with the HTC One M8 in 2014. You can see the brushed aluminium that takes over the entire back of the M8, and it wraps around the edges unlike before, meaning that there's now 90% coverage of aluminium on this device, of course excluding the Gorilla Glass panel on the front that protects that super LCD display. And of course you do also get the aluminium on the front panels here, along with the boom sound speakers, which are now 25% louder than they were in the original HTC One. While in my opinion the design of the new HTC One isn't quite as good as the design of the old HTC One just on looks, the new HTC One is certainly much more comfortable to hold. In fact, you can see those curves around the outside just make it that much more ergonomic than the reasonably sharp edges that you can see on the HTC One M7 that I'm holding in my left hand. And it's for reasons like this that just make the HTC One M8 one of the most fantastically designed smartphones that I've ever used. It's got a combination of premium materials and fantastic ergonomics that you simply can't go past on current Android devices. Of course, there are some unusual oddities that you'll find comparing the HTC One M8 to the M7. Most notably, you'll see that there are now on-screen buttons on the M7, but they haven't actually removed this sort of black bar at the bottom here. You can see the black bar here on the M7 does have those physical buttons, but they haven't bothered to remove it on the on the M8, which kind of does make the device quite tall. As you can see here, comparing the two devices, you'll find that the M7 is a little bit shorter than the M8, which can almost entirely be attributed to the 5-inch display on the M8. They also haven't bothered to sort of change the way that the power button is featured on the device. It is still way up here on the top, which is a little bit inconvenient. As you can see, it's quite an awkward position to try and press that button on the top, but we do now have a thing called motion launch, where you can simply double tap the display to turn it on or off. You can swipe up and it immediately unlocks the device. And there's another one where you can rotate the device into landscape mode and hold down the power button and it will immediately launch the camera. So these are all ways to sort of get around the problems associated with having the power button on the top of the device. But ideally I would like to see it on the side here alongside the volume rocker. Taking a look around the edges of the device, you'll find both the micro USB 2.0 port and the 3.5mm headphone jack along the bottom of the device. On the right hand side, as I mentioned before, you'll find the volume rocker as well as the micro SD card slot, which is a new addition to the HTC One M8 and should improve the amount of storage that you should get in there for a relatively low cost. On the top here you'll find an interesting plastic black strip which some people think actually hides the infrared LED which is included on the M8, but in fact that is inside the power button as it was on the M7, which you can find here along the top. On the right hand side it's completely bare except for the nano SIM slot, which you can find up the top there. Make sure of course you do get a nano SIM if you do end up picking up this device. On the top you'll find the boom sound speaker along with a hidden notification LED, along with the sensor array and the 5-megapixel front-facing camera. And on the bottom of the same panel you'll also find the other boom sound speaker, giving you that stereo sound while you're of course using the device. On the back, the most interesting addition here is of course the Duo camera with the depth sensor that you can see above the standard ultra-pixel sensor below. There's also a two-tone LED that you should be able to see to the left of the camera, and of course we do have that same plastic or polycarbonate strip in between two metal bands, which does facilitate the wireless radios inside there. You can't actually have a back of a device entirely aluminium without some sort of concession like this to get Wi-Fi, 4G and a number of other things working inside there. But it does look kind of nice, and you can of course pick up the device in the silver edition that you can see here that was used on the M7, you'll be able to get that in the same color as this device. Also down the bottom here, you'll notice that there is just a few bits of information regarding to regulatory stuff. There is no Beats audio in this device, of course. The partnership between Beats and HTC did break down, so there's no Beats inside this device, but you do get sounds enhanced by Boom Sound, which sound quite good. The display on the HTC One M8 is a 1080p Super LCD 3 display, so it uses the same technology as the M7, and basically we're getting the same sort of fantastic color quality from this display. As you can see here by the background here, it simply looks fantastic. And you also notice this in areas such as when you're sort of browsing text in the Twitter app, you'll notice that 1080p resolution at 5 inches and that pixel per inch density of around 441 ppi gives absolutely fantastic text. If we bring it up in here, it looks quite as good as paper. The display can go quite bright and it has good contrast. As you can see there, it looks simply fantastic on this display when you're trying to read anything text related, and that is one of the benefits of having 1080p displays in smartphones. If we look at some real world photos on the HTC One M8's display, you'll see of course fantastic color saturation and clarity from the display. It is rivaled these days by LG displays like you will have seen on the LG G2 and also the Nexus 5, but you still get some really solid results out of this Super LCD 3 display. Of course, you can notice here on this side that we do have that space taken up by the on-screen buttons, which does reduce the actual screen real estate to around 4.7 inches normally, although in some apps you can see here that the content actually does go behind the buttons there, which is a nice little addition and gives that nice translucent effect that we've seen from Android 4.4 onwards. Throughout some parts of this review, you've already seen me browsing around the operating system, but this is all possible thanks to the Snapdragon 801 SoC inside, which on this Asian model of the HTC One M8 brings a 2.5 GHz quad-core Crate 400 CPU, along with an Adreno 330 GPU and 2 GB of RAM. If you do get the international model, you may find that the processor speed is cut down to 2.3 GHz. But as you can see here, I've got the 2.46 GHz model, Qualcomm Snapdragon 801. This makes the operating system simply fly. If you're opening any application or reloading or multitasking anything, you will notice that it is extremely quick. For example here, that app loaded essentially instantly. If you load up things such as Chrome, you will find that it loads pretty much instantly, and of course you can browse between tabs and all sorts of things like that with relative ease. You notice that going back to the home screen and things like that is simply astonishingly quick. If you want to jump straight into the settings, everything loads within an absolute fraction of a second, powered by that extremely powerful Snapdragon 801 SoC that's in there. In terms of benchmarks, it's not that much faster than the 800, but it is significantly faster than what you'll find in the HTC One M7. If we power it up here, you notice that it's not a huge difference. It's still, of course, buttery smooth, but opening things just takes that little bit longer to perform each of the actions than in the extremely powerful HTC One M8. On the HTC One M8 here, we've fired up GTA San Andreas running at max settings, which is extremely stressful on GPUs, especially when it's trying to render at 1080p. And you can see that it's not exactly entirely smooth on this GPU as we try and drive around, which is surprisingly difficult on camera. But you can notice that the effects produced from this game are actually quite good, of course enhanced for Android devices. And it's not too laggy running at full settings, but you can actually get a better performance out of this device in this game if you turn down some of the graphics settings. We'll get out of the car just briefly and sort of walk around. Notice again that it is not the smoothest performance at the moment, but again, if you do turn down those settings, you will find it will perform a little bit better. And this is running on one of the most fast SoCs that you can get, so this game is extremely taxing, and to be honest, I haven't exactly seen it run the best on any device, but you will probably get the best out of the HTC One M8. And again, moving back to the home screen, everything like that is extremely quick, even if you've come from an intense game like GTA San Andreas. Sense 6.0 is a much improved skin over Sense 5.0 that we saw on the HTC One M7, and this is due to a number of reasons. Both of these devices are currently running Android 4.4, which is the latest update available for both, but Android 4.4 and Sense 6 is a much nicer combination on the HTC One M8, mostly because of some visual tweaks that they have done to this device. You'll notice here that there is not as many gradients immediately on the home screen as you'll notice, and things such as blink feed of course have received updates. You also notice here in the notification pane that the entire focus of Sense 6.0 has been removing gradients and making it look more cohesive with Android 4.4 itself, which means that if we dive into applications such as the calendar on both devices, you notice that it does look similar, but we've got this nice sort of highlighted blue effect at the top. It's more flat. The actual features of the two apps are pretty similar, and this is to be expected. They haven't added many features between the two devices, but now if we jump into an app such as Gmail, we'll see things here that it seems to just gel a lot better with the Android interface compared across the two devices. Of course, if we jump into things such as the app drawer as well, you notice that there are a few differences that sort of make this just a nicer experience overall. That, you know, time has been completely removed, as is pretty much unnecessary with the time in the top left-hand corner. It's just a whole bunch of improvements like this that makes Sense 6 a much nicer experience overall. One thing that's also been improved between the HTC One M8 and the M7 is blink feed. The application is still your main way to sort of access feeds and sort of an aggregate of all your social media and things, but it's a much nicer application to use, mainly because you can actually add your own custom topics, as you can see here, but just has this nicer interface that allows you to drill down more on the things that you want to see. For example, if I want to switch blink feed to only seeing gaming, I can simply of course swipe out from the side as I did before, and it's only currently showing up gaming news. I can switch back to highlights pretty quickly simply by tapping there. And I have the ability to add content. We've still got the same categories that HTC has been pushing in the past, but if you click search and you search for a particular topic such as cats, you can, for example, add a feed entirely dedicated to cats simply by tapping on that button there. So you can actually have a mix of both HTC's own sources and the sources that you love, including RSS feeds, right in blink feed. It's a significant update, and it sort of makes the entire feed that much more worth using because you can use it as an aggregate for all news. And there's some things that I've actually been reading here in blink feed that I would never have normally read, so it's a fantastic service. But that said, if you don't actually want to include it, you can simply click Manage Home Pages, click here and click Remove. Blink feed is gone, and you can simply tap it to, of course, bring it back if that's something that you want. So you get the flexibility of either having or not having blink feed if you do decide. If you dive here into the settings, you'll notice here we've got some quick toggles as you will usually have expected. And one of the things you can do with the HTC One is do something called media output, which unfortunately I can't show you here. You simply swipe with 3 fingers down the display and you can output any content to devices that are connected throughout your house. There is also an option here to personalize your entire theme of the device using different colors for highlights, different backgrounds. It's quite a limited feature, but it's an interesting one that HTC has included. I did mention before, of course, motion launch gestures. You can enable and disable them in the settings, as well as control things such as the notification LED and the brightness of the display. Another fantastic area that we've got in here, which is the Do Not Disturb mode. You can, of course, turn off all notifications if you want and silence the device during meetings, or alternatively automatically while you're sleeping, which is a feature that I really love in some devices. There's a couple of other options here that you'll find, such as you can go into and do the power saving mode and various other things. I haven't got extreme power saving mode on the HTC One yet, but I'm expecting that it will come in an update sometime in the future. And just on the battery life of the HTC One M8, it's actually quite good, as I've been experiencing here. I've had this device off the charge for maybe 4 hours now. We'll just check the power usage statistics here. We can see exactly what the battery has been using, but it does seem to be at least several hours longer than what I experienced with the HTC One M7, which is of course a boom. This device has a 2300 mAh battery. This device has a 2600 mAh battery. So you're already getting that bigger battery to go with the more power efficient Snapdragon 801 SoC. Undoubtedly, the biggest improvement to the HTC One M8 comes in the form of the duo camera, which you can find on the back. As I mentioned before, this is a combination of the 4 megapixel or ultra pixel sensor that HTC has gone with on the M7, which features 2 micron pixels as well as an f2.0 lens. Interestingly, they've actually removed optical image stabilization compared to the HTC One here, which is a bit of an interesting thing when they're trying to focus on low light images, and of course OIS improves low light images, but they're guaranteed that the sensor in there is actually good enough for your low light images, and I tend to agree. At the top we've also got a 1080p depth sensor. Now this doesn't actually capture 3D images or capture images in dual focus, but it adds a bit of data to the EXIF portion of each JPEG image, allowing you to do some cool features that I will actually demonstrate for you now. So we're here in the gallery application, and this is a photo that I've taken previously on the HTC One M8. It's quite a decent shot for a camera that takes photos that are just 4 megapixels large, but we'll take a look at some of the features that you get from the Duo camera. Most notably, if you click effects, you'll get here a range of features that use the depth sensor, and the one that I think you'll be using most is probably called U-Focus. As you notice here that it is immediately defocused the background of this device, and as it says on the little pop-up that came up before, you can actually tap anywhere on the photo and it will attempt to refocus on this area, which is a very cool effect. As you see here, I switch between focusing on the herbs and focusing on the actual pan. As I said earlier, it doesn't actually take two different shots. This is all a simulated effect from the depth sensor, but nevertheless it's very cool, and I think out of all the features on this is the one that you will be using the most. It is the most cool out of all of them and the least gimmicky. In fact, I think that you'll probably be using that feature. Unlike some of the other features that you get on cameras, U-Focus isn't gimmicky. I think you'll actually really enjoy using it, but I'll just show you some of the other features that you can have. One of them is called Backgrounder. You can actually set a range of features to go on the background behind the subject that you photographed, again using depth information to already do that. Another one is called 3Dimension Plus, and as you can see here, it sort of provides a 3D-like effect, using of course that depth data again to sort of simulate this. It doesn't take any more than just the one photo. Also, there's another feature called Copy and Paste, where you can cut out people from other photos and place them in your photos, which is quite an interesting effect if you want to do that. Also get a range of filters if you want to adjust how your sort of photo looks, or you can go back and choose manual. You got frames, you got the usual tools, but it really is this U-Focus effect, not the foregrounder effect, that I think you'll be using the most, and it really takes advantage of that Duo camera. Of course, I always wonder if it's worth HTC including the Duo camera over a larger megapixel count in the main rear camera. It's interesting to see a device where the front-facing camera at 5 megapixels actually is a larger pixel count than the rear-facing camera. But nevertheless, I do think the inclusion of 2 micron pixels does get some really great results in low light images, even despite the lack of optical image stabilization. But I still just wish that you had more of a room to sort of zoom in on these photos. I mean, you notice here as I zoom in that you're simply not getting that quality that you'll be used to from a 13 or 20 megapixel camera. I think they could easily have included a 1/2.3 inch sensor here, maybe at 8 megapixels, which would have been a fairly reasonable effort. But alas, HTC has included the same 4 megapixel camera on the back, and that is really only one of the main downsides to the HTC One M8. At the end of the day, the HTC One M8 is a simply fantastic device. Everything from the superb build quality that makes this feel like a premium Android device without giving away any of the ergonomics, to the 5-inch 1080p display that looks simply fantastic, to the powerful Snapdragon 801 SoC, and to the incredibly useful and cool Duo camera, alongside cool things such as the improved Sense 6.0 interface, Android 4.4 out of the box, that micro SD card slot is a fantastic addition, boom sound is as good as ever, and also you don't get too bad battery life from the device either. One of the main downsides to the device is the 4 megapixel camera that I mentioned before. I'd love to see a larger megapixel count in a future version of the HTC One, and also some people have alluded to the fact that this device is a little bit taller than necessary, and of course with that power button on the top it's not exactly in the best position. But that said, this is an absolutely fantastic device that you can pick up for, I think it's $700 unlocked and outright. HTC has done a wonderful job, and this will be an extremely hard phone to beat in the coming months, with the likes of the Galaxy S5 and the Xperia Z2 being launched very, very shortly. And that's it for this review of the HTC One M8. If you'd like to check out more details and a full in-depth analysis of this device, don't forget to check the full written review. Links to that will be in the description below. Also, don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel for more cool reviews like this coming up in the future. You can follow us at TechSpot for more information and all the news that we cover on our Twitter feed. And if you want to ask me any questions about the M8 or any other Android device that I've currently got my hands on, feel free to do so at my Twitter feed at ScorpusV. Thanks guys, and this has been a TechSpot video review.